I'm standing in my garage, watching a woman named Tessa hold a measuring device to check if my wife parks straight or crooked in our own driveway. She just handed my wife a $200 fine for parking improperly, and it sounds insane, right? But it gets better. Karen is threatening to call the cops to arrest my wife if she doesn't comply. What she doesn't know is that my wife not only has the right to park here, but also holds a position Karen couldn't even imagine. Want to make a splash? I'm asking you to mark our positions because I'm about to witness the most spectacular career self-destruction live. Ready to see a Karen go up against a police chief? Tell me where you're watching from. I bet your HOA horror story can't beat this. It was a Tuesday afternoon in Evergreen Oaks when I was fixing the front porch light. I heard the familiar rumble of Tessa's Honda pulling into our driveway. She'd just come back from the gym, looking relaxed in her workout clothes and with her hair pulled back in a ponytail that had seen better days. Today, she seemed a bit rushed, parking the car at about a 10 degrees angle compared to her usual perfectly straight position. The afternoon sun was hitting our driveway at just the right angle to make the slight deviation obvious to anyone who cared enough to look. Before I could wave hello to my wife, I heard aggressive knocking at the front door, like someone was collecting overdue debts or serving legal papers. Melinda Griggs stood there in a red blazer, holding a thick clipboard, preparing to deliver a court verdict. Her hair didn't move in the breeze, and her lipstick was applied with military precision. Clearly, someone who thought she was the queen of our street, with the posture of someone who'd appointed herself judge, jury, and executioner of suburban aesthetics. Her expression carried the kind of righteous indignation that suggested she'd been planning this confrontation for days. Good afternoon, Mrs. Monroe. I'm Melinda Griggs, president of the Evergreen Oaks HOA. Your vehicle positioning is violating our area's aesthetic standards, she announced with the authority of someone reading a court verdict. Her voice carried the kind of practiced formality that suggested she'd rehearsed this speech, and she held her clipboard like a shield against any potential disagreement. Tessa, still wearing her gym clothes and looking like she'd rather be anywhere else, looked at Melinda with an unusual calmness that I'd noticed before but never really questioned. Good morning, ma'am. Could you please specify what violation you're referring to? She responded, and I could hear something in her tone. Not defensive, not annoyed, just professionally interested. It was the kind of voice someone uses when they're gathering information rather than preparing to argue. What happened next was like watching a reality show unfold in my own front yard. Melinda knelt down like a crime scene investigator, using her measuring device to check the car's angle. She muttered numbers under her breath and made notes with the intensity of someone conducting nuclear research. Your vehicle is 12 degrees off alignment, which exceeds the permitted deviation, she declared, producing an official-looking violation notice from her clipboard with the flourish of someone presenting evidence to a jury. I watched from the porch, wondering if our neighbor had completely lost her mind or if this was some kind of elaborate practical joke. But what really caught my attention was Tessa's reaction. Instead of getting annoyed or arguing back like most people would, she read the violation notice with the same careful attention someone might give to a legal document. Her eyes moved across the page with systematic thoroughness, and she asked questions that suggested she understood legal processes better than the average suburban housewife. I see, and this HOA registration number corresponds to which county filing? She asked, and I noticed Melinda's confident expression flicker for just a moment, like a light bulb with a loose connection. The HOA operates under community consensus. We don't need bureaucratic approval to maintain standards, Melinda replied, but she was clearly thrown off by Tessa's specific question about registration numbers and county filings. My wife was asking the kind of questions that suggested she knew something about legal processes that the rest of us didn't. Melinda's response sounded like someone who'd been caught unprepared for a test she thought she'd already passed. The whole interaction felt surreal. Melinda with her measuring tools and clipboard like some kind of suburban engineer, Tessa responding with unusual calm and precision, and me watching from above, wondering why my wife seemed almost amused by the situation. Mrs. Monroe, I hope we can cooperate to maintain the beauty of our neighborhood, Melinda said as she prepared to leave, her voice carrying the kind of false sweetness that barely concealed a threat. Of course, I'll review this documentation carefully, Tessa replied, and there was something in the way she said documentation that made it sound like she was already planning her next move. A slight smile on her face suggested she was enjoying this confrontation more than she should have been. After Melinda walked away with her victory smile, I saw Tessa pull out her phone and make some notes. I couldn't hear, but she then took a photo of Melinda's license plate with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this kind of thing before. The way she handled her phone, the systematic approach to documenting evidence, it all seemed strangely professional for someone dealing with a neighborhood dispute. "What are you doing, honey?" I called down from the porch, my curiosity finally getting the better of me. "Nothing much, just collecting information," she replied. And the way she said collecting information made me realize my wife might have skills I didn't know about. The whole encounter left me with more questions than answers, but I had the distinct feeling I was about to learn something very interesting about the woman I'd been married to for 3 years. Something told me this was just the beginning of a much bigger story. Melinda standing in my garage, determined to bring watching a woman named Tessa hold a measuring device to check if my wife parked straight or crooked in her own driveway. Maybe she'd respect legal authority. She just handed my wife a $200 fine for parking improperly. I need police assistance at 1247, right? Oak Street. But it gets better. I have a resident threatening to call the cops to arrest community regulations if she doesn't making legal threats. What she doesn't know is that my wife not only has the right to park confident tone, but also holds a position Karen couldn't even imagine reach. Want to make a splash? What she didn't realize was that she was about to step into a trap because I'm about to witness the most spectacular she'd worked herself into a state where she genuinely believed ready to see a Karen go questions about legal authority. Tell me where you're watching criminal behavior. I bet your HOA horror story can't beat this. The irony was so thick. It was a Tuesday afternoon with Evergreen Oaks when I was calling law enforcement to handle someone who had familiar rumble of Tessa's Honda pulling into our driveway. Officer Jake Stevens arrived 20 minutes relaxed in her workout clothes to handle a and with her hair pulled back in a kind of call that usually involved fence lines. Today, noise complaints, a bit rushed, property parking the car at about a 26 years old compared to her usual perfect and had been with the force for just over 2 years. The afternoon sun was hitting our driveway car just pulled up to our house to make the casual deviation obvious, and he stepped out with the relaxed demeanor of someone who before I could wave hello to my wife. Calls. I heard aggressive knocking at the front door, sitting calmly on like someone was collecting overdue debts demeanor or changed in a way that should have been a warning. Melinda Griggs stood there in a red blazer, holding casual posture straightened, preparing to deliver much more verdict. And his expression shifted from routine boredom, and her lipstick was applied with military-like recognition, clearly with respect. Someone who thought she was the queen of our street. Good afternoon, with the posture of someone who'd appointed herself shifting to something much more formal, an executioner of suburban aesthetics. Like a student addressing a professor, carried the kind of righteous indignation that suggested she'd been planning this confrontation for days. Good afternoon, Mrs. And there was something in the way they acknowledged each other that suggested a history Melinda was completely missing. Your vehicle positioning from the garage, violating our confused by the strange formality between my wife. She announced with the authority of someone reading a court verdict. While Melinda launched into her carried the kind of enthusiasm of someone who believed she was finally getting the backup, and she held her clipboard like a shield against this woman is flagrantly violating community standards, still wearing her gym clothes and looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. She needs to be arrested with an unusual calmness that I'd noticed Melinda before, declared, but waving her clipboard like evidence. Good morning, in a criminal trial. Could you please specify what violation you're referring to? Suggesting she'd been practicing, and I could hear something in her tone. Officer Stevens looked uncomfortable, not annoyed, shifting his weight from foot to foot like someone who'd been asked someone uses when they're gathering information rather than preparing to argue. He tried to explain jurisdiction was like watching a reality show unfold in my own front yard. Ma'am, Melinda knelt down like a crime scene investigator, using her measuring we can only enforce criminal violations. She muttered numbers under her breath. He said made notes with the intensity but Melinda was having someone conducting nuclear research. She demanded to speak to his supervisor to get a real officer who understands authority, which exceeds the becoming more belligerent with each passing minute. Producing an official-looking violation notice from her clipboard with the she gets away with someone presenting evidence. Officer Stevens hesitated. I watched from the porch, wondering if our neighbor had completely lost her mind, or if this was some kind of elaborate practical joke. Almost imperceptible. But what really caught my attention was Tessa's reaction. Instead of getting annoyed or arguing back, almost like he was waiting for instructions, she read the violation notice with the same careful attention someone might give to a legal document. She slowly stood up from the porch. Her eyes moved across the page, brushing her palms together like someone preparing to speak questions that suggested she understood. There's no need to escalate this better than the average suburban housewife. Her voice calm, but with an edge. And this HOA registration number from high-ranking office county courtroom drama. She asked, but this wasn't TV. Melinda's confident expression my wife for just a moment. What
like
she
a
failed
light
to
bulb
notice
with a
was the
loose
way
connection.
Officer Stevens
The
kept
HOA
glancing at
operates
Tessa
under
with
community
something that looked
consensus.
suspiciously
We don't need
like
bureaucratic
deference.
approval
The kind
to
of
maintain
respectful attention
standards.
subordinates
Melinda
give to
replied,
people they
but
recognize
she was clearly
as authority
thrown off
figures.
by Tessa's
His body
specific
language
question
suggested
about
he was more
registration
concerned
numbers
about
and
Tessa's
county
reaction
filings.
to this situation
My wife was
than he
asking
was
the
about
kind of
Melinda's
questions that
complaints,
suggested
and
she
he seemed
knew
to be
something
waiting
about
for some
legal
kind of
processes
signal
that the
or
rest of us
instruction
didn't.
that wasn't
Melinda's
coming from the
response
woman
sounded
with the
like
clipboard.
someone who'd been
The
caught
atmosphere was
unprepared for a
electric with
test.
tension. She thought
Tessa
she'd
remained
already
seated
passed.
on our front
The
steps,
whole interaction
completely
felt
relaxed
surreal.
despite
Melinda,
having
with
a
her
police
measuring
officer
tools
called
and
to her
clipboard
home
like
some
some
kind of
angry neighbor.
suburban engineer.
Officer Stevens
Tessa
stood
responding with
unusually
unusual
straight,
calm
his
and
posture
precision,
suggesting he
and me
was
watching
dealing with
from
someone
above,
he recognized
wondering
and
why my
respected,
wife seemed
while
almost
Melinda
amused by the
gesticulated
situation.
wildly with her clipboard.
Mrs. Monroe,
Convinced
I
she was
hope we can
moments away
cooperate
from
to maintain
vindication.
the beauty
The
of
whole
our
scene
neighborhood.
felt like a powder
Melinda
keg
said
waiting
as she
for
prepared
someone
to
to light
leave.
the fuse.
Her voice carrying
"Ma'am,
the kind
are
of
you
false
certain you're just a
sweetness that
marketing
barely
freelancer?"
concealed a threat.
Officer Stevens
Of course,
asked Tessa,
I'll review
and my
this
confusion
documentation
deepened.
carefully.
Why was a
Tessa
police officer
replied,
questioning
and there
my
was
wife
something
about
in the
her
way
job?
she said
What did her career have to do
that
with
made
a
it
neighbor
sound like
dispute
she was
about parking
already
angles?
planning her next
The
move.
question hung
A
in the
slight
air
smile
like
on her
smoke,
face
and I could see
suggested she
both
was
Tessa
enjoying
and
this
Officer
confrontation
Stevens exchange
more
a
than
look
she
that
should have
suggested they were
After
communicating
Melinda
on
walked
a
away
level
with
the
her
rest of us
victory
weren't
smile,
privy to.
I saw
Officer
Tessa pull out her
Stevens,
phone
I
and make
work
some
in the
notes.
field I was trained
I couldn't
for.
hear, Tessa
But she then
replied,
took a photo
and there
of
was something in
Melinda's
her tone
license
that
plate
made it
with the
sound like a
practiced
code
efficiency
only the two
of
of them
someone who'd
understood.
done this kind of
The
thing
young
before.
officer nodded.
The way she
Then
handled
asked,
her phone,
"Should I handle
the
this
systematic
according to
approach to
standard
documenting
procedures,
evidence,
ma'am?" It all seemed
and Tessa's
strangely
response sent
professional
chills
for
down
someone
my
dealing
spine
with
for
a
reasons
neighborhood
I couldn't
dispute.
explain.
"What are you doing,
Always
honey?"
follow proper
I called
procedures,
down from the porch,
Officer
my
Stevens.
curiosity
The way she
finally
said
getting
it
the
wasn't
better
a
of me.
suggestion.
Nothing
It was
much,
an instruction
just collecting
given by
information,
someone
she
accustomed to
replied.
being obeyed.
And the way she
The
said
conversation
collecting
between
information
them was
made
happening
me
on
realize my
multiple
wife
levels,
might have
with
skills I
meanings
didn't
and
know about.
implications
The whole
flying
encounter left
completely
me with
over
more
Melinda's
questions
head.
than answers.
She was so
but I had
focused
the
on her
distinct
own
feeling
complaints
I was
and
about to
demands
learn
that she
something
missed
very
all the
interesting
subtle
about the
signs that
woman
she was
I'd
dealing
been
with a
married to for
situation
3 years.
far more complex
Something told
than
me
she
this was
understood.
just the beginning
Officer
of a
Stevens
much
was
bigger
clearly
story.
recognizing Tessa as someone with authority, while Melinda continued to treat her like just another suburban housewife who needed to be brought into line. As Officer Stevens prepared to leave, having explained to Melinda that he couldn't issue citations for civil HOA matters, something happened that changed everything. Before getting into his patrol car, he turned toward Tessa and gave what was unmistakably a respectful salute. It was subtle, professional, but absolutely clear to anyone watching. My jaw dropped as I realized I'd just witnessed a police officer saluting my wife, the woman I thought worked in marketing and spent her days dealing with advertising campaigns and client meetings. The salute was like a crack appearing in the facade of my understanding of reality. Everything I thought I knew about my wife, my marriage, and my quiet suburban life was suddenly called into question. "Melinda," I called out before she could storm away, "I think you might want to reconsider your approach here." But she was too angry to listen, too convinced of her own authority to recognize the warning signs that were becoming increasingly obvious to everyone except her. "I don't care what game she's playing," she shouted back. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss an update. Have you ever had an HOA nightmare like this? Let us know in the comments below. See you in the next video.